Section 1 of Weird Tales Double Feature: The Shadows and The Projection of Armand Dubois. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by Ben Tucker. Weird Tales Double Feature: The Shadows and The Projection of Armand Dubois by Henry S. Whitehead. The Shadows, Part 1. I did not begin to see the shadows until I had lived in old Morris's house for more than a week. Old Morris, dead and gone these many years, had been the scion of a still earlier Irish settler in Santa Cruz, of a family which had come into the island when the Danes, failing to colonize its rich acres, had opened it, in the middle of the 18th century, to colonists. And younger sons of Irish, Scottish, and English gentry had taken up sugar estates, and commenced that baronial life which lasted for a century, and which declined after the abolition of slavery, and the German bounty on beet sugar had started the long process of West Indian commercial decadence. Mr. Morris's youth had been spent in the French islands. The shadows were at first so vague that I attributed them wholly to the slight weakness which began to affect my eyes in early childhood, and which, while never materially interfering with the enjoyment of life in general, had necessitated the use of glasses when I used my eyes to read or write. My first experience of them was about 1 o'clock in the morning. I had been at a gentleman's party at Hacker's house. Emerald, as some poetic-minded ancestor of Hacker's, had named the family estate 3 miles out of Christiansted, the northerly town built on the site of the ancient abandoned French town of Bassin. I had come home from the party, and was undressing in my bedroom, which is one of 2 rooms on the westerly side of the house, which stands at the edge of the old Sunday market. These 2 bedrooms open on the marketplace, and I had chosen them rather than the more airy rooms on the other side because of the space outside. I liked to look out on the trees in the early mornings, whenever possible, and the ancient marketplace is overshadowed with the foliage of 100-year-old mahogany trees, and a few gnarled otahites and Chinese bean trees. I had nearly finished undressing, had noted that my servant had let down and properly fastened the mosquito netting, and had stepped into the other bedroom to open the jalousies so that I might get as much of the night breeze as possible circulating through the house. I was coming back through the doorway between the 2 bedrooms, and taking off my dressing-gown at the moment, when the first faint perception of what I have called the shadows made itself apparent. It was very dark, just after switching off the electric light in that front bedroom. I had, in fact, to feel for the doorway. In this I experienced some difficulty, and my eyes had not fully adjusted themselves to the thin starlight seeping in through the slanted jalousies of my own room, when I passed through the doorway and groped my way toward the great mahogany 4-poster in which I was about to lie down for my belated rest. I saw the nearest post looming before me, closer than I had expected. Putting out my hand, I grasped nothing. I winked in some surprise, and peered through the slightly increasing light as my eyes adjusted themselves to the sudden change. Yes, surely. There was the corner of the bedstead just in front of my face. By now my eyes were sufficiently attuned to the amount of light from outside to see a little plainer. I was puzzled. The bed was not where I had supposed it to be. What could have happened? That the servants should have moved my bed without orders to do so was incredible. Besides, I had undressed in full electric light in that room, not more than a few minutes ago, and then the bed was standing exactly where it had been since I had had it moved into that room a week before. I kicked gently, before me with a slippered foot, against the place where that bedpost appeared to be standing, and my foot met no resistance. I stepped over to the light in my own room, and snapped the button. In the sudden glare everything readjusted itself to normal. There stood my bed, and here in their accustomed places about the room were ranged the chairs, the polished wardrobe. We do not use cupboards in the West India Islands. The mahogany dressing table, even my clothes which I had hung over a chair where Albertina, my servant, would find them in the morning and put them, they were of white drill, into the soiled clothes bag in the morning. I shook my head. Light and shadows in these islands seem somehow different from what they are like at home in the United States. The tricks they play are different tricks, somehow. I snapped off the light again, and in the ensuing dead blackness I crawled in under the loose edge of the mosquito netting, tucked it along under the edge of the mattress on that side, adjusted my pillows and the sheets, and settled myself for a good sleep. Even to a moderate man, these gentlemen's parties are rather wearing sometimes. They invariably last too long. I closed my eyes and was asleep before I could have put these last ideas into words. In the morning, the recollection of the experience with the bed being in the wrong place was gone. I jumped out of bed and into my shower bath at 6:30, for I had promised O'Brien, captain of the U.S. Marines, to go out with him to the rifle range at La Grande Princesse that morning and look over the butts with him. I like O'Brien, and I am not uninterested in the efficiency of Uncle Sam's Marines, but my chief objective was to watch the pelicans. Out there on the glorious beach of Estate Grande Princesse, Big Princess as the black people call it, a colony of pelicans make their home, and it is a never-ending source of amusement to me to watch them fish. A Caribbean pelican is probably the most graceful flyer we have in these latitudes, barring not even the hurricane bird, that describer of noble arcs and parabolas, and the most insanely, absurdly awkward creature on land that Providence has cared in a light-hearted moment to create. I expressed my interest in Captain O'Brien's latest improvements, and while he was talking shop to one of his lieutenants and half a dozen enlisted men he had camped out there, I slipped down to the beach to watch the pelicans fish. 3 or 4 of them were describing curves and turns of indescribable complexity and perfect grace over the green water of the reef-enclosed white beach. Ever and again one would stop short in the air, fold himself up like a jackknife, turn head downward, his great pouched bill extended like the head of a cruel spear, and drop like a plummet into the water, emerging an instant later with the pouch distended with a fish. I stayed a trifle too long for my eyes. Driving back, I observed that I had picked up several sunspots, and when I arrived home, I polished a set of yellowish sun spectacles I keep for such emergencies and put them on. The east side of the house had been shaded against the pouring morning sunlight, and in this double shade I looked to see my eyes clear up. The sunspots persisted, however, in that annoying recurrent way they have, almost disappearing and then returning in undiminished kaleidoscopic grotesqueness. Those strange blocks and parcels of pure color changing as one winks from indigo to brown and from brown to orange and then to a blinding turquoise blue, according to some eerie natural law of physics within the fluids of the eye itself. The sunspots were so persistent that morning that I decided to keep my eyes closed for some considerable time and see if that would allow them to run their course and wear themselves out. Blue and mauve grotesques of the vague general shape of diving pelicans swam and jumped inside my eyes. It was very annoying. I called to Albertina. "Albertina," said I, when she had come to the door, "please go into my bedroom and close all the jalousies tight. Keep out all the light you can, please." "Ah, right, sir," replied the obedient Albertina, and I heard her slapping the jalousie blinds together with sharp little clicks. "The jalousie are closed, sir," reported Albertina. I thanked her and proceeded with half-shut eyes into the bedroom, which, not yet invaded with afternoon sunlight and closely shuttered, offered an appearance of deep twilight. I lay, face down across the bed, a pillow under my face, and my eyes buried in darkness. Very gradually the diving pelican faded out to a cube, to a dim, recurring blur, to nothingness. I raised my head and rolled over on my side, placing the pillow back where it belonged. And as I opened my eyes on the dim room, there stood in faint shadowy outline, in the opposite corner of the room, away from the outside wall on the marketplace side, the huge Danish bedstead I had vaguely noted the night before, or rather early that morning. It was the most curious sensation, looking at that bed in the dimness of the room. I was reminded of those fourth-dimensional tales which are so popular nowadays, for the bed impinged spatially on my large bureau, and the curious thing was that I could see the bureau at the same time. I rubbed my eyes, a little unwisely, but not enough to bring back the pelican's sunspots into them, for I remembered and desisted pretty promptly. I looked fixedly at the great bed, and it blurred and dimmed and faded out of my vision. Again I was greatly puzzled, and I went over to where it seemed to stand and walked through it. it being no longer visible to my now restored vision, free of the effects of the sunspots. And then I went out into the hall, a West Indian drawing room is called the hall, and sat down to think over this strange phenomenon. I could not account for it. If it had been poor Prentice now, Prentice attended all the gentlemen's parties to which he was invited with a kind of religious regularity, and had to be helped into his car with a similar regularity. A regularity which was verging on the monotonous nowadays, as the invitations became more and more strained. No, in my case it was, if there was anything certain about it, assuredly not the effects of strong liquors, for barring an occasional sociable swizzle, I retained here in my West Indian residence my American convictions that moderation in such matters was a reasonable virtue. I reasoned out the matter of the phantom bedstead, for so I was already thinking of it as far as I was able. That it was a phantom of defective eyesight I had no reasonable doubt. I had had my eyes examined in New York 3 months before, and the oculist had pleased me greatly by assuring me that there were no visible indications of deterioration. In fact, Dr. Jusserand had said at the time that my eyes were stronger, sounder, than when he had made his last examination 6 months before. Perhaps this conviction, that the appearance was due to my own physical shortcoming, accounts for the fact that I was not, what shall I say, disturbed by what I saw or thought I saw. Confront the most thoroughgoing materialist with a ghost, and he will act precisely like anyone else, like any normal human being who believes in the material world as the outward and visible sign of something which animates it. All normal human beings, it seems to me, are sacramentalists. I was for this reason able to think clearly about the phenomenon. My mind was not clouded and bemused with fear and its known physiological effects. I can quite easily record what I saw in the course of the next few days. The bed was clearer to my vision and apprehension than it had been. It seemed to have grown in visibility, in a kind of substantialness, if there is such a word. It appeared more material than it had been before, less shadowy. I looked about the room and saw other furniture, a huge old-fashioned mahogany bureau with men's heads carved on the knuckles of the front legs Danish fashion. There is precisely such carving on pieces in the museum in Copenhagen, they tell me, those who have seen my drawing of it. I was actually able to do that, and had completed a kind of planned picture of the room, putting in all the shadow furniture and leaving my own actual furniture out. Thank the God in whom I devoutly believe, and know to be more powerful than the powers of evil, I was able to finish that rather elaborate drawing before, well, I must not run ahead of my story. End of Section 1. The Shadows, Part 1.